Hi, and welcome to another class on the PHP 2 level. In this activity, we're going to develop a security class, which is basically a way to log in and accomplish the authentication on every page in your application. And so here's the document that we're going to be following for the requirements. It's called security class. So we're going to demonstrate how to build this class, how to handle a login, and also to create a few more things along the way. So I have the final project here in front of me, and this is where we're going. So you can see I have a very simple login page. I have the correct name and password, and I choose login. Actually, it was not the correct name. So let's change that again. Let's try that again. And this time I have login path. And it says I'm a protected page. So you can see along this side, we're going to create, it looks like about 8 or 9 different files and make this a general login handler that we can use throughout our application. Alright, so here's the first thing we do is we start a new project. Let's name this thing topic 2 and we'll call it login security and choose finish. Okay, I'm going to go back to the instructions here and see where we can start on working with this. So we're going to have a class called security service, and this is where most of the work will be done. That security service will be used by the login handler, and then we also have to start somewhere. So let's start down here where we will create a login HTML form, and then we will handle that with the PHP command login handler. So we'll start with item 3b and then move to item 3a. So let's start with the simplest of these requirements. We're going to simply have a login HTML form. So in my folder, I'm going to create a new file. And let's call this thing login.html. So I create the usual HTML head and body. The body is going to have a form, and then we'll have an action on that form. So the action is going to be the login handler. And I'm going to choose the post method because we don't want to show the password in the URL at the top of the screen. Let's ask for two things. Let's ask for a username and a password. And then let's put in an input field for each of those. And the other input will be a password type. The only other thing that probably needs to be put in there is a line break so that they don't all show on the same line. Lastly, let's put in a button. Alright, I think that will bring us to the end here. I'm going to save this, and let's go into our browser now and see if we can make this work. So I'm going to browse to the local host and refresh the page. I have my new topic 2 login security here, and let's choose the login HTML form. So I should get something like that. Might want to put in another line break, and that should be about it. So let's save the changes and refresh. There, I've got my form. Now when I click login, I need to go and implement the login handler next. So in order to make this login handler function properly, it will have to create, it says, an instance of the security service class. So let's create this class, and then we'll be able to handle our login. So let's see what our security class is supposed to have. This is its name. It's going to have 2 private class variables. So we'll have a username and password as a property, the constructor, and then it also has a method. The method will be called login or authenticate. And that method will return a true or a false statement. And so it doesn't say anything about a database yet. So let's go ahead and create this security service method with 2 properties and a method. So the first thing is to create the file. So let's make a PHP file and let's call it security service. Alright, the first thing we have to do is give it a name. It says in our instructions that we have 2 properties. So we've met those 2 qualifications here. Now the next item, it says create a constructor that uses the username and password. So let's create our constructor. So it takes two parameters, and it will set the properties of our username and password according to the parameters that are sent to it. So there's our constructor. The next item, it says create a method that we use to log in or authenticate, and it will return a true or false. So I'm going to call this thing authenticate. So we need to have a return statement for true or false. Well, first of all, we can check to see if the username is empty or the password is empty, then we'll automatically return false. Now the next part is how do we return true? So if the username matches a certain value, so I'm going to hard code this as the instructions say. If this password equals a certain string, I'm going to set mine to be secret PW. And we also have to match the username. So this arrow username, and I'm going to set it to be SHAD. And if that is the username and password, then it's always a true login. If not, then it's not a true login. So let's do an else and return false. Okay, so now we have a function that returns a true or false, and it'll authenticate according to this hard-coded password. In the future, we would probably want to go and talk to the database and see if there is a username called Shad and see if his password does match that. Otherwise, we'll just simplify it the way it is today. Okay, so we have our security service ready to go, so let's save that. Now, our login handler. The login handler here, it says it will use this security service class. So let's see how that would work. So let's create a new file and call it login handler. So I'm going to have to, first of all, import the security service. So let's do a require, let's choose once, and the word security service. Now we're going to modify the way we do this requiring in just a minute, but for right now this will work. So if you recall from the login form, we have two variables called username and password that are coming from the form. So we can first of all capture those. So I'm going to say attempted login name equals the post variable, and the username is the name on the form. Then the second one is the attempted password, and that is also from our post variable, and that was called password. Now, just to see if those are working, let's do an echo statement and see if we got what we expected. Alright, so at this point we're just going to see if the name and password were sent to the form correctly. So let's save our work and let's go back to the browser and try it again. So I have a username and password. So let's put in ASDF and a bunch of numbers for the password, and it says you tried to log in with these two. So we know that the post value has been passed to the form correctly. Now let's go ahead and work with that. Now I'm going to use the security service object and see if we can get a authentication. So let's call this thing a new variable called service. And it's going to be a new security service. And as you can see, the security service is asking for a username and password. So let's try attempted login name as a good start. And then attempted password as another good start. Okay, so now we can ask a question if the authentication value comes back as true or not. So let's say logged in equals service, and then we'll do an arrow, and look at there, we have a method called authenticate. So let's check to see if this is logged in. Alright, so we have a success message if we get a true, or a fail if we get a false. So it says login fail. So I did not put in the right password. Let's back up and let's put in the correct password. So as you recall, shad and secret PW should come out to be a success. Alright, so we're going to make this a little bit more elegant. We're going to have a session variable set now. So as you recall, that when we use session variables, we can store information and pass it from one page to another. So we have to do a session start at the beginning of our page. And so it's a function that's going to go up here. Now we're going to modify and do a little refactoring, but we'll get there. So if we are logged in, we will give a session variable a value of true. So let's set up a session variable. And I am going to name the session variable the word principal. Now that's a function, or that's a variable name that is commonly used as an object. A principal might have properties such as the name, the time of login. It might have properties such as who the user was, number of attempts. It could have a lot of data in it. But right now, the only thing we're going to create is a Boolean variable. So true is set because it is logged in. The other option, of course, is if it did not log in successfully, then the session variable of principal will be set to false. So instead of going just to a string on the page, I want to include another page. So let's go include and make a new login passed variable, or page I should say, and we'll include that. The other is going to be a login failed. So those pages need to be created next. A message that says you've passed or you failed. So let's go and create a new file now. Let's do the success message first. So PHP login success. This will be pretty simple. We're just going to say echo you are logged in. And let's do the fail in a similar way. Okay, let's try another login. And it says here, you tried to log in and we have a problem. Login passed. I didn't name it correctly, so we better go back and change that to the file name. It's called login success. And the other one was called login failed. I think that one might work. Let's try again. So resubmit. Okay, let's see if I can spell better. Login, S-U-C-C-E-S-S. And if I get the name typed correctly, I will eliminate some errors. So let's try login success again. There, it says you were logged in as I included this message now from another file. Alright, now we got a problem though, because the login handler has is going to provide us the correct pathway. But what would happen if I just went straight to the page called login and I typed in success.php? It says you're logged in and I haven't even entered my password. So we've got some security issues obviously. So let's go back and change a few things. First of all, at the top of the page, session start needs to be set on every page. So when you see something being done on every page, a great way to do that is to create a header. So let's start with a PHP file and let's change this name to header.php, and the only thing it has to do is to say session start. Okay, so now on our login handler, let's see, where is he at? I'm going to delete this and tell it to require once the file name header. So if we were to put a message up at the header, it would show up on every page. Login success, same thing here. We're going to put in include once header. Okay, let's do the login failed, same thing. Okay, so all the pages looks like they have header. Now there's another issue that we can probably avoid. The login handler is requiring this object, which works great, But there's another method that we can use so that if we were to have multiple objects in our application, we could include them all with one line. Watch what happens if I forget to require once here. If I change this line with a comment and save it, come back and let's try the login attempt. I'm going to say your class service is not found. This is a very strange error. Why does it say service not found? Did I type something wrong? Let's go back and look in security service, and sure enough, I called it service. Sorry about that. Let's try security service and save that, and let's go back to the login handler and security service. That makes more sense now. Sorry about that. Let's make those typos changed. Let's do a refresh, and we should get a different error. Now it says, yes, your security service class was not found in the login handler page. So that's because I forgot to do the require once method. Well, here's the next method. We're going to choose a Autoloader function that will include all of the required classes that we need in our program. So if we have more than one file to include, the Autoloader will do it automatically. So let's go and make a new file, and let's name it Autoloader. So there is a special function called SPL Autoload Register. Okay, so what this will do, it will run whenever there is a required object. If there is an object that's referenced, it'll look for this file, this little program, and it will try to attempt to load the function when it's needed. So inside here you can put in the word function and the class that we're going to need. And then that function will run inside of here. So we will simply have one line in it. It'll say require once, and then we'll put in the word the class followed by a period PHP. Now you notice there's two periods there. One is inside of the string, which is the file extension, and the other period is just the concatenator. So that will require any object when it is needed. So Autoloader is our file that we're going to require now. So instead of doing the manual load one at a time, we'll do require once, and we'll put in the word Autoloader, and we'll put that at the top of every file. So if there is a need for any objects, it'll show up here automatically. So we'll put it in the file for success. We'll put it in the file for fail. So I think we're done. So fail, login handler, and success all have two files at the beginning. So we've got the header, and we've also got the require once. Okay, so I'm going to make sure that everything's saved, so let's choose save all. Let's come back to our web page and attempt a login. And it says your login failed. Okay, so let's put in the correct password. And it says you were logged in. So now I've got ourselves a fully functioning object called security service, and it automatically logs me in. Now we don't have a part where we can check to see if the page is actually supposed to load or not. So what I would like to do then is on login success, let's have a check at the beginning to see if the person's actually logged in before we print that message. So I want to do a new require page, and we're going to call this page secure page. So anytime we load secure page, it's going to check to see if we've been logged in correctly or not. So we have to go and create that. So let's see. What is secure page going to look like? So it's going to simply check to see if the session variables are set correctly. So let's include the header. And the reason why we include the header, once again, just to remind you, is that it includes the session variables. Okay, so secure page, first of all, loads the header. Then we're going to check to see if a bunch of things are set. So if the first thing we're going to do is set, if the session variable for principal has been set, or if it has not been set. So if we're going to say if this is equal to false, in other words, it has not been set. Okay, so for the specific variable that we're checking on is the setting called principal. So if that has been set to false, in other words, it doesn't actually exist, then we want to redirect the person. So let's change the word header, and it's going to tell it the location of your web browser is going to the login HTML page. And so that'll redirect the person directly to log in again if they have not set this variable yet. Well, there's other options that we could check if the session variable has not been set, or you might want to check to see if they have set it incorrectly, so they have not logged in with the right password. So let's try that again. Let's do session, and the word principal is the variable, and if that is set to null, or hasn't been set yet, or if the session variable has been set to false. So we have three conditions. One is principal has not even been set. Second condition is principal was set but to a null value. And the third is the principal value was set to false. In other words, it was a wrong password. So any one of those cases, all three need to go back to the login page. So let's save that. So now if we do a login success and we run through this secure page, it will check to see if they have been logged in or not. So let's try it again. So let's go back, log in. It says you are logged in. However, if I were to log in with an incorrect password and I have your login failed, so now my login session variable should be wrong. If I attempt to go and try login success, it should direct me directly back to the previous page. So login failed obviously doesn't need to have a success or failure. Anyone in the world can look at login failed. But if we want to have a secure app, then the only people that can see this page are the ones that have actually logged in.